All for One reveals the person he fears most, the League make their first move, and Star and Stripe faces off against her toughest opponent yet? Let's talk about all of this and more as we dive right into the newest chapter of My Hero Academia. So My Hero Academia Chapter 329 is finally out, and with it we finally get a look into what All for One and the League have been getting up to since their attack on Tartarus. That's right, it's a very villain-centric chapter, and it contains all of your favorite villains. We got Nutsack Boy, Gex, Cloakhead, Daddy Issues, Blood is My Kink, and so much more. In this chapter, All for One reveals his evil plans, the Paranormal Liberation Front begin their resurrection, and Star and Stripe faces off against a worrisome opponent. But before I begin talking about this chapter, I'm first going to go into a quick summary of what happened last time. And as usual, don't forget to Detroit smash that like button and slide into that subscribe button's DMs to hit that notification bell. In the last chapter, we witnessed All Might's psychotic therapist Stain's grand escape from Tartarus prison, in which he ended a Discord moderator's life, broke into the prison's monitoring room, robbed the data drive from a newly crippled man, promised to fulfill said dying man's wish, and yeeted himself into the ocean to deliver the data drive to his biggest crush, All Might. The story then cut away to the symbol of chest pain and peace discussing the contents of Stain's data drive with police detective and newly identified hot stuff Sukuichi and his partner Sansa, the Catman, who is undoubtedly the biggest pussy cat I have ever seen. In this discussion, we learned that All Might talks to himself inside of One for All, keeping his vestige up to date with all of the current events, but just like anyone who's received an unwanted dick pic, his vestige never replies and always leaves him unseen. They call me daddy now. Sukuichi also informs us that Shigaraki and All for One can communicate with one another through radio waves. And after FBI manning their conversation during Tartarus, he has learned that Shigaraki will be fully healed in 3 days' time. Remember when Japan's greatest doctor said they had another month? Well, that was a fucking lie. But with this mic drop moment, the story shifted once more. This time to the Hall of Justice, or just some building for international heroes where we see all of the countries around the world explaining that they can't just send in all of their top heroes to help Japan, as they kinda need them too, which is a very fair response if you ask me. However, the number one American hero, who is essentially Rule 63 All Might and will undoubtedly be Rule 34, Star and Stripe, said screw the rules, I have capitalism and stealth bombers, and she hopped on, like literally hopped on, the first plane over to Japan. And this is where chapter 329 picks up. This chapter opens up with All for One sitting on a throne in an unknown cave surrounded by a bunch of Nomus talking with the League's resident lizard man, Spinner. Here, All for One informs Spinner and us that since the police have been forced to focus the majority of their efforts on stopping all of the prison escapees, the villains have successfully relocated to a small island nation away from Japan. That's right, the League are no longer in Japan. After informing us of this, All for One then gloats about how this successful relocation means the villains have won the game of hide and seek with the heroes. However, Spinner chimes in asking, can they really call it winning if they were forced to hide away from Japan? In response to this, All for One tells Spinner that successfully escaping was the first step in achieving his goal, and he reveals that getting his hands on One for All will only be the second step in his plan. Hearing this, Spinner becomes confused, as he mentions how he thought obtaining One for All was All for One's ultimate goal. However, All for One explains that this was never the case, and that throughout his long life he has always been waiting for a specific opportunity, and he thinks that this opportunity is finally getting closer. However, it all depends on what happens with the biggest hurdle that is approaching. All for One then goes on to explain that he has friends all around the world, and that although All Might has wiped out nearly all the criminal organizations in Japan around the world, there are still plenty of them in existence. And if there was a sudden shift in power, either a lack of heroes or more powerful villains in these countries, then the world would crumble. But right now, there is one thing that is preventing the villains from coming together and destroying it all. And that one thing is Star and Stripe, or as All for One refers to her as, the world's strongest woman. All for One goes on to say that she is currently his biggest threat, and the person that he fears most of all, stating that if she were to ever find and confront them, the power of All For One and all of their plans would be in some serious trouble. But inversely, if they somehow managed to steal her quirk, then All For One would be near unstoppable. After explaining all of this, All For One then points at Spinner and proclaims that he has a job that only Spinner can accomplish. Since Spinner has a mutation type quirk and has been discriminated for it his whole life, All For One claims that there are tons of people out there that can relate to him and are willing to follow him through the shadows. And as All For One says this, the story briefly cuts away to a city street where we see a poster of Spinner himself pasted on a wall with the words "Spinner is our spokesman" written on it. During this cutaway, we also see some of the key members from Spinner's regiment in the Paranormal Liberation Front approach the poster and say that although Redestro has been captured, the seeds of liberation are still being planted, and that they are here to round up anyone who is willing to join Spinner's cause. The story then cuts on over to Skeptic, working away on his iconic laptop, talking to the remaining Liberation soldiers out in the streets, saying how he doesn't like the OG League members one bit. However, whether they realize it or not, they are the true liberators of this world. Redestro realized this himself, and that's why he was willing to give up everything to work with them. Skeptic continues this speech by saying that the Liberation Army members should worship the League to make them realize their true potential. And he ends his grandiose speech by saying, "We will be the ones to sow the seeds to set up Tomura Shigaraki's destruction of the future." Also, it's important to point out that as Skeptic is saying all of this, we see a poster on a city wall that says the tragedy of Himiko Toga will keep repeating itself, as well as a shot of Toga herself against a white background so we can't tell where she is, a shot of Dabi or Toya in a forest who still has his white hair, and this shot of Spinner showing his reflection as a copy of Stain, which is a great way of showing off that Spinner has finally become just like the person he worshipped. Following this, the story then cuts on over to Hawks and Genist, who are still driving in the car, where we see them talking about Star and Stripe's arrival. Hawks mentions that Star will be in Japanese airspace shortly, and that he is delighted knowing that she will be here to help them. But he is worried if she will be able to handle all of the pressure of their dire situation. However, Best Genist reassures our beloved Birdman that working under intense pressure is Star's specialty, and that's what makes her such a valuable ally to have at this time. Immediately after saying this, however, Endeavor and Hawks receive an emergency call from police detective Sukuuchi, who informs the pro heroes that something else has appeared in the sky about 50 kilometers away from Star's planned landing spot. And in a tragic moment of realization, Sukuuchi cries out, "It's him, he's here." The story then cuts away once again, and we see Star and Stripe above the clouds, looking buff as all hell, might I add, like god damn, face to face with none other than Tomura Shigaraki. Star makes a quick comment about how he must be a pretty free guy to come and greet her so quickly. However, her jovial and very All Might-esque demeanor quickly changes to a serious one as she asks, "Are you the villain they call All For One?" And with this, chapter 329 comes to an end, as we get this final shot of Shigaraki standing atop a flying Nomu saying, "Well, who am I indeed?" Overall, who would have guessed it, it was another fantastic chapter. I also do want to point out that when Shigaraki says, "Who am I indeed?" in Japanese, he says the word ore for I, which is really interesting as All For One only refers to himself with the word boku. So it seems that this person is more Shigaraki than All For One. Finally, seeing the villains again after so long, even if it was only briefly, was fantastic. And I love how although we are getting getting this quick update on them, we still don't know where exactly each of them are or what they are up to. It keeps us in the loop, but it also makes sure we don't know what other tricks might be up their sleeve. All for One revealing that not only is capturing One for All only a stepping stone in the grand scheme of things, but that he genuinely views Star and Stripe as a threat is a nice turn that actually makes a lot of sense. Of course, All Might wouldn't be the only person he would be wary about. There are tons of amazing powers out there. That being said, I'm also super curious about what exactly Star's quirk is. According to All for One, it's an absolute game changer, so it must be something crazy powerful. Shigaraki's return is surprising considering he's not supposed to be complete until 3 days' time, but it also looks like he isn't fully healed yet, as he is still missing fingers and potentially his right arm. Although I will say, he does look pretty badass in that cloak. But let me know what you think of this chapter. If you like this video, don't forget to leave a like and comment what you think is going to happen next. For more My Hero content, subscribe to the Lunchtime Crew. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Plus Ultra.